This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest a man who is not in the arena, but affects the arena, a governmental affairs specialist named Jason Isbell, who's the Senior Vice President for Governmental Affairs for Regions Bank, the biggest bank in the state, probably the biggest corporation in the state, housed in the state, and he's in governmental affairs, and he lives here in the Montgomery area. Jason, good to have you on the show.
Thanks, Steve. Happy to be here.
Jason, may I ask you, were you born and raised in the Montgomery area?
I was not. So I was actually born in Mobile, and I was adopted when I was almost 3 months old by some kind folks in Sylacauga, Alabama.
So you grew up in Sylacauga?
I did. I lived there my whole life, graduated from high school there. Great town to grow up in, loved it there, and moved to Montgomery for college in '98 and been in this area ever since.
That's when I left the legislature, '98.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, growing up in Sylacauga, did you ever meet Bill Nichols, your congressman?
You know, I didn't.
He was in Congress, though.
He was. I remember when he passed away. This is small town Alabama at its finest. His funeral was on the local radio station.
They held it live on
and I remember our class, I was in 3rd grade when it happened, and I remember in Miss Snyder's class, I remember listening to that funeral on the radio.
Can you believe he put his funeral on the radio?
Sure did. It was downtown.
I'm going to tell you something. He was a great congressman. Do you know he died, if I'm not mistaken, he worked constituent work so hard. It was Christmas Eve or somewhere around there. He was his office handwriting return letters.
How about that?
That's the kind of congressman he was, and he was really powerful on armed services.
Sure. Well, they named a veterans home after him there in Ellick City, I believe.
He got the money for it. You know, Mike Rogers is in that seat now. He's doing pretty much the same thing that Nichols did, as far as where he's serving in the Congress on the thing.
Alabama's always had good representation on Armed Services Committee.
They sure have. This district we're sitting here in Montgomery, there used to be, there was no question if you were in this 2nd district, the old 2nd district, you need to be on Armed Services to protect Maxwell Gunner and agriculture to protect the peanut program in the Wiregrass.
Makes sense.
We were talking about prior to the show, Bill Dickinson was in that seat. He was my good friend and sort of mentor in politics. I worked for him here in Montgomery and in Washington growing up. Did you like politics growing up in Sylacauga, or did you like sports better?
You know, sports was probably a little bit more my taste. I don't really come from a political family. My parents weren't overly political. I guess we were Republican. I don't really even know growing up. But I sort of came into this world haphazardly. I was actually offered an internship at the Legislative Computer Center when I was in college, and it worked out with my class schedule, and I got paid a whopping $9 an hour, and that was really my first introduction to Alabama legislature, and that was 20-something years ago now.
So you knew more about computers than you did politics.
You know, that's probably a stretch too. I just happened to have a good interview that day and got an email from our college career services officer, and literally my first day in the Alabama State House was the day I interviewed for that internship, and that would have been in '99.
So you grew up in Sylacauga. Now you must have played sports. You're a pretty big guy.
Well, I was on the football field every Friday night, but it was between the 2nd and 3rd quarters. So I was big into band.
Oh, you in the band?
I was in the band and played trumpet. Was drum major of the Sylacauga High School marching band my senior year, and I was into baseball a lot growing up. My dad was always my coach, and we always enjoyed playing baseball, but never quite crossed over into football.
Growing up in Troy, baseball was our sport till we were about 12, and then Troy was a kind of a high school football town, and they sort of guided us away from baseball. So all I thought about from age I can remember 5 to 12 was Little League baseball.
Yeah.
We would ride our bikes out to Little League ballpark at Knox Street. All of us play every Monday, Wednesday. You played Little League baseball?
Sure.
What position did you play?
So I had a couple years as a pitcher, There was, trust me, there was no college scouts fighting for tickets. And I remember the last position I ever played was third base. That was a good memory for me. A lot of fun.
Let me ask you this question though: how did we talked about this once before. When you finished Sylacauga, you came straight here to Montgomery to go to Faulkner.
I did, yeah.
What was Faulkner called before Faulkner?
So before Faulkner University, it was called Alabama Christian College.
That's right. Was it Alabama Christian when you were there? Or
No,
it
sir.
was already
They
Faulkner?
changed the name in the mid-'80s, and so by the time I showed up in '98, it was Faulkner University.
Did you choose Faulkner because you're real active in the Church of Christ?
I did. It was, honestly, Steve, it was the only school I applied to, and that was a place.
Because of that? Because
yeah.
you were.
I visited Faulkner my first time probably in 7th or 8th grade, and that was just it for me.
That far back? You
Yes,
knew
sir.
from that far back?
I did. Isn't that crazy?
What did you major in?
Business administration. Honestly, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but that felt like a good choice, and I enjoyed the classes and enjoyed the professors, and so that was my undergrad degree.
You know, a businessman, Troy, was real active and real benevolent toward Faulkner. Was Kenny Harris? Did you ever meet
Yeah,
Kenny?
sure. So I graduated from the Harris College of Business.
It's named for him.
It
then.
sure is, and his son is on the board with me there.
Okay, you on the board there
Yes,
now?
sir. Sure
So
am.
his son is named Ken Jr.
That's right. One of his sons are, I think. That's right. But great family. Truly, they have been important benefactors to the university. I went to college for a while with his granddaughter.
Who is that now?
Her name was Shauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Shauna.
Yeah.
I should. She's one of my daughter's age.
How about that?
They went to school together.
Good benefactors. Faulkner's blessed to have them and many others.
I used to visit with Kenny sometimes. He and my mom and daddy graduated high school together.
How about that?
Kenny Harris did, and
Yeah.
I don't know Ken Jr. much. I was his representative, and he would call me every now and then, but not much.
Yeah.
You know.
I think Harris Tire's still doing well there.
You know, being a banker, you know Kenny Harris started the bank there in Troy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he started a bank, and I really want to think it merged with Colonial.
Okay.
It was a Pike County bank.
How about that?
It was Pike. Did pretty good right there on the corner where you turn to go to Enterprise now on
Okay.
231.
Yeah. No, right where that is.
Well, I think Wells Fargo's there now.
Probably so.
Wells Fargo, maybe the parent of it. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe the ancestor, what do you call it?
That's right.
Of that bank. But anyway, Kenny started a big bank there. He and a guy named Robert Dunn,
Okay.
who was a road builder, started a bank there in Troy, and I forget who it merged with, but Kenny made a lot of money in that bank, and he was a good man. He loved that Church of Christ and that Faulkner University. Speaking of that, as you told you once before, I'm finishing up Jabbo Wagner's biography.
Sure.
Had a group of businessmen, really a lot of Church of Christ guys, got behind that and wanted me to do it, and it'll be out sometime in the fall. Jabbo Wagner loves his Church of Christ. You learn a lot about somebody when you write the biography. His roots go back to Mount Hermon Church of Christ. His ancestors were Church of Christ. You probably know this being active in Church of Christ, but the people who settled North Alabama really came down from Tennessee. And that's where the Church of Christ was really almost founded, around David Lipscomb in Nashville. If you look back, anybody who's from all that central part of Tennessee, that very, very predominant Church of Christ, more than Baptist.
Sure.
You knew that, didn't you?
Absolutely. There are certainly pockets of Alabama and Tennessee and Arkansas and Mississippi where Church of Christ is very, very strong. And there's nobody better to write Jabbo's book than you. So I'll put it right next to Goats and Governors when I get it.
Thank you. It'll be a good book. It's got a lot of stuff. You'll enjoy hearing some stuff about legislation he passed. But I go to his church with him sometimes, the Homewood Church.
Homewood, sure.
And it's close to where my house is in Birmingham, Ross Bridge, and he'll invite me to come over there. He's sort of a missionary for that church. People don't realize that. He's really a missionary in a quiet way.
Yeah.
He doesn't show it on his sleeve, but he loves his roots. And you know his son-in-law was a song.
I do.
And Wayne Kilpatrick, the longtime pastor there, was his.
That's right.
Was his Lynn, them a father-in-law. But anyway, he's got a pew. I call it a pew. It's a whole area that Jabbo sits in, and I sit with him, but he's recruited. Swade comes too.
Yeah,
And Swade was on the Faulkner Bowl, but he went to Searcy.
that's right.
After for a while, but then he's got Gene Hallman going.
Yeah.
Gene goes. I don't think Gene was Church of Christ. He goes because he's that boy.
Well, listen, you ever make it to University Church, you can sit with me on my pew too. So.
Where is your church, University?
University is basically in the on campus where Faulkner is, right?
Oh,
on
so
Atlanta
you go
Highway.
there. How you live at Pike Road? How long
I
does it
do.
take you to get over there?
10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, not too bad. My wife and I, and now our boys, we've been going there honestly since Kim and I were in college there.
Speaking of that, so you met your wife Kim at Faulkner.
I did.
Was she a Church of Christ person? How big going there?
You know, interestingly, she was not until after she came to Faulkner. She grew up in Montgomery, graduated
In
from
Montgomery.
Lee, yes sir, and was really just looking for a college close to home, and ended up coming to Faulkner, and you know, I'm certainly better for it.
What did she major in?
She was a business major. Yeah.
Y'all the same age and everything?
Well, you know, the numbers get kind of fuzzy. She might be a little older than me. She probably doesn't want me saying that, but that's just math. And no, we were in a lot of business classes together, and it really enjoyed that. That was it was fun to always have somebody to go to class with.
So you have two boys.
I do, yes sir.
Now how old are they?
So my oldest, Maddox, just turned 16. So we've got a driver in the house.
So
now.
he was named after your wife's family or something?
No,
you just picked that name out?
We just picked that name out, and my
like
youngest.
a family name or something.
It does, doesn't it? No, we don't know really anybody quite with that name. Certainly not in our families. And then our youngest will be 13 on Sunday. His
16
name's
and
Griffin.
13.
16 and 13.
Now, what grade does that put them in?
So Maddox will be going into 10th grade at Pike Road High School this fall, and Griffin will start 7th grade.
Now, are they playing sports out there?
No, they, you know, I think our sporting days are over. We're sort of a community theater family, especially Griffin. He's about to start his 5th play at the Shakespeare Festival here in Montgomery, so he takes that pretty seriously. So instead of the ball fields, we spend time on stage and backstage getting ready for different shows.
They've been real
throughout
active
the
in
year.
that church, I assume.
They
too.
have, they have. We love our youth group there at University, and you know, that's certainly important to our family and important to them as well.
Jason, you have a reputation of being an announcer for sporting events. So you're the announcer for the Pike Road ball games,
Yes,
football,
sir.
and what now?
No, home varsity football games.
Home varsity football.
I've been the public address announcer there for, gosh, I guess probably the last 4 or 5 seasons.
How'd you get doing that? You've got a real distinct voice.
You know, no, sometimes when you volunteer or get volunteered for something, it just ends up being your job pretty quickly. When Pike Road started its you know, brand new school system, we didn't have a football team, and the first year that we did, our school superintendent, who himself was a former football coach, was the stadium announcer. Well, you can imagine that school superintendents have a lot to do on Friday night football games. So he had a lot of responsibilities, and I just asked him one time if he ever needed a sub or a replacement, that I'd be happy to help. And here we are 4 or 5 years later. But one of my most prized possessions, when Pike Road won the state high school football championship, they gave me a ring. But instead of QB or RB, it says PA on it for public address announcer. So
I like that.
We're proud of our Patriot football team, and that's a fun place to be on Friday nights in Pike Road.
I have Gordon Stone on this show every year, and we just marvel at how much he's grown.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in the legislature when Gordon first became a lobbyist, and Ellen was a lobbyist for the Medical Association.
How about that?
Yeah, and I was chairman of the health committee, so I sort of groomed Ellen, brought her in, and then Gordon and she started dating, and they got married. And those girls are grown now. That shows you how time flies by.
That's right.
But Ellen's daddy was superintendent of the Ozark City Schools, Dale County, and I had that part of my legislative district.
Sure.
But let's get talking about banking a little bit.
All right.
You came from, but like in your early 40s, so would you go into banking right after Faulkner? Tell me your
No.
bank.
So when I was at Faulkner, I worked for the Legislative Computer Center, like I said, and my first job after graduating was with the Legislative Fiscal Office which is now
Joyce
part
Bigby
of,
was there.
Joyce Bigby was the fiscal officer then, and now that's part of the Legislative Services Administration. But we were, you know, we were the budget writers, and it was a wonderful place
Who was
to
chairman
learn
of Ways and
government.
Means?
You know, back then it would have been John Knight and,
Oh, yeah.
and Richard Lindsay on the House side.
Richard was chairman.
He was great.
We
yeah.
came together in '82.
How about that?
We were freshmen together.
And it would have
Same
been Senator Hank Sanders in the Senate, would have been chairman for a while up there. And really, you know, Roger Bedford, whether he was chairman or not, was very, very involved in writing budgets, as you can imagine.
I love that.
Great place to learn government. You know, it was very nonpartisan, very academic, and it was wonderful.
How many years were you there?
So I was there from '02 to 2010. So I went to
8 years.
8 years. Went to graduate school and law school at night while I was working there. It was really just.
What, an MBA?
I got an MBA from Auburn Montgomery, and then law school back at Faulkner.
So in 2010, the Banking Association came to you? Or?
No, you know, in 2010, I took my last law school class at Jones there and passed the bar in 2011. But right at the beginning of 2011, I got a job in the Speaker's office there in the Alabama House as general counsel. And so I actually took the bar in between the organizational and the regular sessions in 2011. Great job. Worked with another Sylacauga boy, Josh Blades.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a really good team there in the office and had a really good time at that. So I started with the Bankers Association in right around Labor Day of 2013.
Were you head of it, or who was the head of it?
No,
doing government affairs?
A gentleman named Scott Latham's been head of that for a long, long time. But yeah, I was the attorney and the lobbyist for ABA, and I represented Alabama bankers up until I stared at Regions almost 3 years ago.
So that was 10 years there then?
Right. So I started with them in 2013 and really ended, I think, August of 2021.
Well, tell our viewers about Regions. They are by far the biggest based bank in the state. Holding company.
Right.
Regions Financial Corporation. Talk to me about, explain to our viewers about how big Regions is and some of its founding banks and that sort of thing, and your duties and how many states you're in.
Sure.
That sort of thing. Because you're the whole senior vice president for the entire Regions bank system.
So for state government affairs, yeah. So
not federal though.
Not federal. That's right. You know, banking is a hyper-regulated industry.
It really is.
So banks have to think about laws and regulations that they pass in Montgomery, and certainly laws and regulations that get passed in Washington, D.C. And even for a state chartered bank like Regions, the focus is always going to be primarily on what are federal lawmakers and federal regulators going to do. So we have a team, a wonderful team that's based there in Washington, D.C. that watches over all of that. The stuff that happens in the state capitals is really kind of what I keep my eye on and spend my time on. So Regions, you know, really, Steve, the history of Regions is about as old as the state itself. It wasn't probably 15 years after Alabama was formed that the Huntsville branch of the State Bank of Alabama opened.
1834, right?
That's right. And once that branch opened, it eventually became the First National Bank of Huntsville, which in the early 70s merged with First National Bank of Montgomery.
It stayed that to the 70s.
It stayed there to the 70s.
From 1834 to that long, it was
right.
First National Bank of Huntsville.
And then it merged with First National of Montgomery and Exchange Security Bank of Birmingham to become First Alabama.
So Exchange Security was one of the last big bank that merged.
That's right. So it was those three banks really from Montgomery, Birmingham, and Huntsville.
First National in Huntsville.
First National in Montgomery.
Which was a pretty big bank.
Sure was.
It was a dominant bank.
That's right.
Here around the corner over
That's
here.
right.
It and Union Bank were the two big
That's
ones.
right. And so it stayed First Alabama with sort of those three banks as the foundation until mid-90s. 96 it changed to Regions Bank, and of course it's been Regions Bank ever since then.
It's expanded a lot since then.
Sure. I think at the time it became that merger in the 70s, the assets of the new bank was less than $400 million, and I think now our assets are over $150 billion. We're in 16 states now. Anybody that watches a football game on Saturday knows we're the bank of the SEC, but
Yeah.
but we're also in some non-SEC states. We actually have a branch in Salt Lake City, Utah, thanks to an acquisition. We've got a presence in Illinois and Iowa and Indiana and in North Carolina.
Texas?
And Texas, certainly, yeah.
Big in Texas?
We are, especially some of the markets there like Dallas and Houston, really growing cities and frankly regions in that large state. Those have been great markets for the bank to pick up. But Alabama's home. Nearly half of our 20,000 employees are here in Alabama. We've got just shy of
20,000 employees.
Yeah.
And 10,000 of them are in Alabama.
That's right. That's
Does
right.
that make y'all one of the largest employers in the state, you think?
It would have to be, sure.
How many Alabama Power have you think?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting to know, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry to interrupt you. But
No, not at all.
20,000 total, and half of them are here.
That's right.
Most of them in Birmingham with the center.
That's right. So our headquarters, of course, downtown Birmingham. We've got a big operations center out in the River Chase area, not too far from where you live, and then 190 or so branches around the state.
190 branches.
That's right. So obviously a lot of our associates go into those branches each and every day to serve our communities, and so obviously Regions is an Alabama company. You mentioned really one of the largest. I think historically we've been one, if not one of two, Alabama companies in the Fortune 500, and so that's certainly a point of pride for the bank. But I think Regions is really a conglomeration of probably 100 or more financial institutions that have merged over the years, and so we take all the communities that we're in, really, really seriously. What we can do for those communities, our customers that are there, the associates that live there. That's something that's really embedded in the bank's corporate culture. That at least they've talked about it an awful lot over the 3 years I've been there.
Jason, it looks to me like you got a big imprint in the Panhandle of Florida too.
Sure.
It looks like the region's got a real big hold in it. Would you say y'all are one of the biggest in the Panhandle?
Yeah, so I think in the state as a whole, we're probably the 5th or 6th largest bank in Florida. Interestingly, we have more branches in Florida than we do Alabama, and that really speaks more to the number of folks in the state, and that is an oversaturated banking market. I mean, there really aren't many regional or larger banks in the country that don't have some type of presence in Florida.
Well, because all the old people live there.
Well, listen, I don't know about that, but there's certainly a lot of folks that are that call Florida home, and really, as you know, the Panhandle and Miami are both in the same state, but they couldn't be farther away or more different in many respects. But we're lucky to have branches on both ends of the state and in the middle as well.
What kind of issues would you have on the state level that you'd have to help solve? Now, y'all got a big presence in Nashville too.
We do.
You
Yes,
spend
sir.
a lot of time in Nashville.
So we're the Bank of the Nashville Predators, the hometown hockey team. Our logo's right there on their hockey sweaters every game, and Nashville obviously is a town that's grown so much over the years, and so we've got a great market executive, a great team. We've got a lot of customers on Music Row. There's a lot of country music superstars that can walk into a Regions bank and be customers when they want to. But state issues are obviously different than federal issues, and frankly, just given the type of bank that we are, issues in Montgomery affect us more than maybe an issue in Tallahassee or Nashville or Jackson or Atlanta. We're always concerned about, especially in Alabama, anything that is just a pro-business piece of legislation. I mean, we count many businesses, particularly small businesses, as our customers. So legislation that's harmful to the business climate in our states is something that we're going to look at. We're obviously very focused on ways that Alabama can improve its standing in the economic development community. I think Governor Ivey and Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth and our leaders in the legislature have been laser focused on improving our standing when it comes to getting companies to come to Alabama or Alabama companies thinking about expanding. A lot of great tools in the toolbox now, and those are things that are important to Regions, because if it's important to Alabama, it's important to the bank as well. So generally speaking, we're always going to be hopeful that legislators think about how their actions are going to impact the business climate in their state. And by and large, our footprint has an awful lot of pro-business legislators in it, which is good. The interesting thing about banks, is that banks might compete with each other on Main Street or on Wall Street or in Washington, but in state capitals, banks pretty much have a uniform stance. If something's good for one bank, it's probably good for Regions too. If something's bad for a bank, we probably don't like it ourselves. So there's a lot of synergy when it comes to bank lobbying and bank advocacy among banks really of all shapes and sizes, which is good to have a unified voice.
So you'd really have the same, you'd be on the same page as the Troy Bank Trust Company.
Absolutely, sure.
I mean, or some other local bank.
I think so. Now there may be issues that Troy Bank doesn't care about and that we do, and vice versa. But by and large, if Jeff Curvin's for it, Regions Bank's probably for it too.
You know that wasn't always the case. I remember when I was in the legislature, banks were getting fights with each other.
Sure.
That's been a while back before you got into it.
You know, a long time ago, Steve, it was difficult for banks to operate outside of a single county.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and
that's
so
what it was. Yeah.
that was really a groundbreaking time when they allowed banking across county lines and across state lines. And so there was a period, I would think, of adjustment there, a little before my time. So I'm just going off what I've heard. But yeah, back then it was probably a different landscape than it is today.
It is. We're one quick question. You only got about a minute left. The branches, are they going to be a thing of the past? Everything going to be online in the future, you think?
You know, I think
so much money is spent on a branch bank.
There is, and branches are very important. They certainly show a commitment to a community. I mean, if we're putting down brick and mortar roots there, it's easier to tell the folks in that area that we care about them and that we're going to be there for a long time. I represented banks in some form or fashion since 2013, and I think my son was 9 or 10 years old before he knew that you could go inside a branch. So
he did his own life.
He just thought we went through the drive-through at best. But you know, there's always going to be business that folks are going to want to take care of face to face.
Yeah. And
so I think as long as folks feel that way, you're going to see branches. Are you going to see more before you see less? I don't know. And branches are changing. A lot of folks do get comfortable banking online, but you know, there's times you just want to go in and sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, and so we're still building branches, I can tell you that.
Good. Well, our time's up, Jason. I appreciate you taking time to be with us.
Happy to be here.
Folks, our guest tonight's been Jason Isbell, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for Regions Bank. We thank you for being with us. We thank you, viewers, for watching. Hope you'll tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Absolutely.